The Long Road to True Happiness by WierdRandomTina. Chapter 11. Fun and Games. After a long weekend packed full of varying hectic celebrations, Poppy was relieved to be able to spend this afternoon with Branch. As much as she cherished all of her musical, heavily populated, mega-energetic events, it was quite nice to relax in a stress-free atmosphere once in a while too. But the only way for the princess to achieve that was to retreat into her pod, and she didn't feel like being all alone in silence either. Visiting Branch was the perfect balance of peace and companionship. Poppy had hoped to spend some time with Creek earlier in the afternoon too. After all, she loved being around him more than any other troll, and he was the embodiment of calm. But this time, he had insisted on taking her out to lunch right in the middle of the village, and she really wanted it to just be about them, uninterrupted, and doing nothing in particular. So Creek had sulked a bit before deciding to treat her another time. He then headed off to tend to his garden, which was still showing no improvement. So Poppy threw together some lunch alone. While eating, she looked over her big heart-shaped scrapbooking, documenting all the time she had spent with Creek. But, for some reason, her thoughts kept wandering back to the times she spent with Branch. Finally, after her lunch, Poppy made her way out to the bunker. She crossed paths with a group of her friends outside of the snack pack. Hairstylist Maddie with aquamarine skin / fancy blue hair. Creek's older sister Sybil with her distinctive pale green skin, purple nose and wavy cyan hair. Moxie, the feisty cherry-pink troll with light pink hair, and yellow-skinned and red-haired green-nosed Mandy, the baker. If they asked if she would like to join them for a volleyball game with several others, Poppy explained that she already had plans, but would love to join them another time. She silently prayed they wouldn't question what her plans were. It would be difficult to come up with an excuse that didn't sound like an excuse. Luckily, all four girls accepted the vague answer, and happily continued on with their own business. Poppy hadn't played a volleyball in ages, and it did sound tempting, but she could fit something like that into her schedule without too much trouble. Branch's availability was much more limited, and she didn't want to miss out on any of it. It had taken all these years to finally get acquainted with the isolated troll. Their time together meant a lot to Poppy, and today she told him so. "I really appreciate that you let me come and visit. Well, I guess it's more me invading your space and disturbing your quiet, but still, you're willing to put up with me. I've always wanted to get to know you, and it turns out you make the perfect company. I knew you'd make a really great friend." Branch's remark wasn't sarcastic, but it was only half-hearted. He didn't believe Poppy fully meant any of those kind comments. She was just being exaggeratingly friendly, as always. She's probably referred to every troll in the village as perfect company and a really great friend. Saying he was a poor excuse of a friend would still be too generous. Visiting him had to be the most mundane part of her day. Experiencing his constant negativity surely dulled down her own happiness, even though her stubborn optimism would make her deny it. It was her who put up with him, not the other way around. Sure, Poppy's irrepressible positivity could get on Branch's nerves at times, but that didn't mean he didn't cherish every minute of it. In his brain, he told Poppy that he appreciated her taking time out of her day to see him, that he very much enjoyed her company, and how grateful he was to have her in his life. But instead, Branch trailed along silently behind the pink princess as she skipped over to his bunker entrance. Inside, Poppy settled onto the familiar olive green couch, while her companion wandered over to the dining table instead. She thought nothing of it, and paid no attention to what he was doing as she organised her pile of board games. After a minute, Branch gently placed a small container on the coffee table. When he sat down beside her, he nudged the container in her direction and said hesitantly, "That's for you." After Poppy opened it and found a handful of raspberries, he mumbled the rest of his sentence. "For
winning the last puzzle game.
He knew that they were her favourite berry to snack on, from her mentioning it a few visits ago, but Branch preferred to keep that part to himself. There was no need to elaborate anyway. Poppy's face was already overflowing with the sweetest smile she'd ever given him. And of course she had to make a huge deal out of his meagre gift. "Oh, thank you, Branch. That's so thoughtful." If there was one thing that Poppy had swiftly learned about the grey troll, it's that softer moments make him uncomfortable. Guess that makes sense. He's used to being grumpy and alone. But I know he'll adjust over time. On the other hand, seeing him all cutely awkward like this is a very nice treat. Even nicer than the raspberries. She happily watched Branch fidget for a few more seconds, observing every little movement he made. Finally, Poppy decided he'd suffered enough and changed the subject. "So, which of these games would you like to play? We have..." The princess held each one up dramatically. "Vines and Ladders, latest edition. Connect 4 Cupcakes. Babble, intermediate level. Jolly Jenga, never play this one with Smidge. Like, ever. Strike 5. And lastly, So Sorry, the original." Branch recognised Vines and Ladders and Babble. He had played the classic versions a few times when he was very young, but all the others were unfamiliar.
"I don't care. You choose."
Poppy was surprised to catch a slight half-smile on the grey troll's face as he continued.
"Knowing you, we'll go through them all anyway."
His tone was light, almost playful. Well, in a reserved, Branch kind of way. "I'll take it. That is true." Excitedly, after a few seconds of debating, Poppy chose Connect 4 Cupcakes. "Have you ever played this one before? Scratch that, have you ever played any of these board games before?"
Branch gave her a blank stare. "Do I look like I play board games?"
The pretty magenta troll pretended to study him intently before answering. Nope, you don't. So let's change that right now. Ready, set, go!" He shook his head and rolled his eyes as she opened the box, but didn't object. Branch was a fast learner. Even with Poppy's vague and hurried explanations, he picked up on each game very quickly. The 2 trolls were sitting side by side like they had last Friday. But today, when his ear touched hers, Branch didn't seem to mind at all. He let it happen more than once, without even flinching. Poppy didn't mind either. Those brief contacts sent little shivers down her neck. "He's finally getting more comfortable being close to me." There was an air of contented concentration around him, too. And, for once, his thick black eyebrows weren't scrunched together due to anger. During his turns, he strategized each move, and she could practically see the gears turning in his brain, and found she was unable to take her eyes off him. Thankfully, Branch's focus was unwavering, so he didn't react to her repetitive, intrigued gazes. Like the first puzzle they had worked on together, Poppy grew too confident playing Connect 4 Cupcakes, and wound up losing when her rookie companion took her out with a trick move. Next they tried out Vines and Ladders, which Poppy won by a hair stretch. Branch had barely covered half the board. He groaned and grumbled as he sank down every vine, while she climbed up every ladder. She found it funny how well the outcome of this game symbolized the 2 of them. Branch turned out to be extremely effective at Babble. Poppy commented halfway through the game, "Wow, I did not see this coming! You really have a way with words, don't you?"
"You don't know the half of it," he said to himself. All those pages of in-depth poetry he had written about the beautiful troll seated beside him. This basic vocabulary game barely scratched the surface of his private skills. Poppy triumphed at So Sorry, and then lost to Jolly Jenga. Despite her tiny hands, the tower of blocks grew more unstable every time she touched it. Yet when Branch removed the blocks, it scarcely shifted. His skill in construction seemed to give him an edge, and even though his bulky hands looked like they would make him clumsy, he was in fact the polar opposite. His delicate and precise movements reminded Poppy of when he tended to her injured arm so carefully. Her heart warmed a bit at the memory. "I never would have suspected he'd have such a soft side." but she also would never have imagined hearing Branch snicker. But he did, when the tower finally gave out on her turn, falling all over her lap and scattering onto the couch and the floor. Poppy let out a laugh too, then started collecting the pieces, with Branch lending her a hand. Speaking of that, when one block remained on the floor, both trolls reached for it. Poppy got to it first, which resulted in Branch grabbing her hand instead. In an instant, he jerked his away and uttered a hushed, "Sorry." Poppy knew her reserved friend wasn't a fan of physical contact, but she couldn't understand why such inconspicuous gestures freaked him out so much, especially when he felt the need to apologize as if he had done something to offend her. "Branch, it's fine. It's not a problem, really. I'm not going to bite." Of course she wasn't going to bite. Branch could intentionally hold Poppy's hand for the entire afternoon without her retaliating in any way. She would be 100% comfortable with it. But that didn't give him the confidence to do it. With all the Jolly Jenga blocks cleared away, Poppy opened up Strike 5. Though he didn't say it aloud, Branch must have really enjoyed this strategic game, because he asked to play another round. She won the first game after scoring 2 lucky full 5s. Then he won the second. Poppy decided to leave this one here in the bunker. "We can play it again another time. Hey, maybe we could try to do another round every day or something. That can be our thing. Also, you can play it by yourself for practice, and to try and beat your own high score." Over 2.5 hours had gone by that day before Poppy finally started to pack up. "I suppose I'd better bring you another prize, since you won 4 out of 7 rounds. I can't believe you beat me at my own game. So not fair."
"You don't need to keep bringing me things."
As Branch watched her happy face droop a bit, he suddenly heard his own rudeness.
"Not that I don't. I just mean, it isn't necessary."
Poppy registered his shift into a regretful tone, and assured him warmly, "How many times do I have to tell you? I want to. I like doing things for you. No one ever does anything for you." Branch's eyes met hers.
How can one individual be so caring? So beautiful.
As always, he was the one to break their gaze, even though his heart never wanted to. Why was scowling so much easier? He could death stare down a whole group of trolls for 24 hours straight without flinching. But to look at someone caringly for 3 seconds, particularly this someone, was next to impossible. There was silence for a minute or so as Poppy mused over her next move. She was still learning how to counteract to Branch's reactions, figuring out what to say or do that would ease his obvious discomfort. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted the green balloon on the floor, just visible over the armrest of the couch. Poppy reached down with a tendril of her hair and grabbed it. Out of the corner of her other eye, Branch was gathering up the dice and papers from the Strike 5 game. With a poorly suppressed grin, she batted the balloon in his direction. It hit his shoulder and bounced back to her. He glanced at her, barely rotating his head, with one eyebrow raised. She giggled, and he rolled his eyes, closing the game box and setting it aside. So Poppy batted the balloon again, and this time it bopped him on the side of the face. She giggled a bit louder, but he kept his gaze straight ahead, his eyes narrowed as he slowly shook his head. But she knew Branch wasn't truly annoyed. He was trying to look it, but there was no telltale creases between his eyes. And instead of a disapproving frown, his lips were scrunched together, as if to prevent his mouth from lifting into a grin. With Branch, there was a distinct difference between being irritated and acting irritated, and it was getting easier for Poppy to distinguish between the two. So she sent the green balloon towards him for a third time. It floated over a higher angle and landed in his black hair, getting caught for a second before slowly rolling down the side. Poppy's stifled giggles had turned into chortles, and she was prepared to keep this up for as long as he'd let her. She retrieved the balloon and aimed it for Branch's face again. It was a little off. So instead of floating directly in front of him, that was when he finally responded, by hitting it back to her. For a couple of peaceful minutes, they lightly batted the balloon back and forth. Both of them were caught up in this mini moment. Poppy chuckled delightedly every time he returned it, her brain only half registering it that this wasn't imaginary. Branch's constant little smile was an involuntary response to her silly sounds of amusement and cute expressions. Eventually, Poppy got overexcited and hit the balloon too hard, sending it beyond the coffee table. Whoops! Her final little laugh was cut short by the ting of hug time. Both trolls glanced at the bright pink-purple flower. For the first time, Branch found himself kind of hoping she'd ask for one. But she didn't. Instead, she cheerfully said that was time for her to get going, and packed up her games. Stupid. Of course Poppy wouldn't ask for a hug. In the very beginning, I practically screamed at her to never even think about hugging me. You could always ask her for one. The logical part of Branch spoke up, but the sarcastic part of him scoffed, Nah, I would never break my routine of being a total hypocrite. And the paranoid part of him wanted to run and hide under the bed at the mere thought of initiating the tiniest bit of affection. Once Princess Poppy left, Branch picked up the green balloon off the floor, pondering as he took it into his bedroom. He set it down on the round red-brown desk where he kept the other little presents she's brought him over the last while. The 3 now empty gift boxes, and the cup and plate with the subtle leaf and acorn pattern. Looking at all her trinkets, he felt a brief moment of warmth, but it was interrupted by an icy tug at his heart, and he sighed. I know she only does these things for me, because she feels like she has to. Not because she genuinely wants to. Like she said, she does it because no one else will. How could a thoughtful troll enjoy doing anything for a grump who never shows that he gives a hair about it? Even though it does mean so much to me, regardless of her reasoning behind doing it. Why is it so complicated for me to express basic gratitude? To simply let her know that despite how I act, I really do value her. If only she could read what's on my mind. Branch instantly cringed at that notion, and retracted the foolish wish with a dry laugh. Yeah, no. With all the dreams, daydreams, and dreamy poetry floating around in my brain, that would be a curse, not a blessing. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. I like that one. I really do. They're trying. And she even got him to quietly laugh. And he's genuinely thinking why is this so tricky? Why can't I do it? I'm sorry if the editing came out a bit glitchy, guys. This one had a few mistakes in it. Of my pronouncing it, I mean. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.